Welcome back to the Good Eye Podcast. My name's Jay Smack, and today my guest is Todd Feldman. Todd was a guest of mine on another podcast that I produce and host called Studio B, which features local music around the Richmond, Virginia area and music in the Mid-Atlantic area, sort of local to Richmond. And he was on that podcast talking about the event SparkJam, which he organized and put on. It was a virtual, primarily a virtual event. And he was talking to Richmond area creatives, businesses, influencers, thought leaders about how to move forward, how to start a dialogue about how to operate in the, I'm sorry for this overused term, the new normal. It was really a really cool thing, and it was June 26th of this year, 2020, that he had that event. You can check out the replays, the session replays on his website at therocketfactory.net. I had him back and to talk about the same kinds of things on this podcast, the Good Eye Podcast, because it's a conversation that businesses, especially small businesses, need to have as things are scaling bigger. The Amazons of the world, the Walmarts of the world, they have more cash to work with, and they have more resources to sort of absorb something like this. So that's where our conversation goes. It's really me just kind of picking his brain about what he thinks regarding business moving forward in this weird new age of COVID and post-COVID, hopefully. TheRocketFactory.net, once again, is where Todd is online. Here is my conversation with Todd Feldman of The Rocket Factory on the Good Eye Podcast. All right, and welcome back to another edition of the Good Eye Podcast. My name's Jay Smack, and here we talk about all things health, wellness, good causes, nonprofits, creativity, and the like. And this is a bit of a departure because this is kind of a part two of a previous podcast, which actually ran on my other podcast, which is called Studio B. It's all local music, but I've got Todd Feldman back from the Rocket Factory, and Todd put together an event earlier this year in the midst of COVID. I shouldn't laugh when I say that, but man, that's ambitious.
It also feels quite a little while ago now, and it's only been 2 months or 3 months.
I think that's really at the root of my chuckle. It's like anything that goes on during COVID, did it really happen?
Yeah.
But tell us about SparkJam, which is local music and events. It was pretty much all virtual, but you had a really impressive lineup and a really impressive involvement by local studios and stuff. But let's talk about how SparkJam was, and then we'll kind of open up the conversation as to where you think performance and creative endeavors and community events are heading, given, I mean, new normal isn't really new anymore, and we're kind of taken for granted that we're going to have to adjust to all this stuff going forward. So anyway, give us the update on SparkJam.
So we held the event on June 26th. It was a Friday in June. We kind of billed it as a kind of like an online festival with business leaders, and we did some live music at lunch. We did some live music at the end of the day with Landon Elliott and Saw Black. But through the day, we invited folks on, made up of like folks from travel and tourism. We had a live arts panel made up of folks from the Broadberry and Virginia Repertoire, and In Your Ear Studios was an active participant in helping us stream the whole thing, particularly around the music piece. We had some restaurant owners and chefs join us to sort of share their ideas on how they've pivoted in the time of COVID, and some really, really good, they share, the day was like a little bit of a brag day, but also information sharing around how to pivot in this time, how to make some adjustments, especially going forward. And I hate to use the word survive, but it's kind of like a lot of what's going on. And I'd say even still, heard some really interesting ideas that were shared out. The replay of the event can be found on the Rocket Factory's website still. We have it under features, and there's a replay link there. But A lot of good ideas. I think for me, the day, I wasn't anticipating it to be a day of call it research, but where I landed, and as any hopefully what is it, tuned in researcher slash consultant, is always trying to help. You listen for what you hear and what gaps you don't hear or things you don't hear. And I loved what I heard, but I also see there's opportunity for a lot more longer term, longer range scenario planning around pivots and just transformation in some pretty large sectors of our economy. So it was a great day and well attended. But I think even the value of the day goes well beyond the day. And we had kind of set out that we were hoping that day would be the spark. And I still think there's a lot of opportunity for some sparks to fly. Yeah. So that's kind of like the next piece. I wrote a couple, we'll talk about it, but I wrote an article about crisis at a crossroads. I think we are at a crossroads and we need to choose which path we want to follow here. And I'm a big into action, being action oriented and trying to figure out new ways forward. And you can't go forward with fear. You have to go forward with optimism. And that's the spirit for which I like to, continue this discussion and kind of give you some, we'll continue the conversation on where SparkJam could go.
I'm looking at the sessions now. There's a bunch of them, like you said, under view session replays. There's a button right on the front, also under features. But there are a number of different sessions. I'm looking specifically at a couple. One I have a question about, and the other I just wanted to touch briefly on. Session 6, you had some real cool heavy hitters from the Richmond area music community. Andy McGraw from U of R and Rumpet, Reggie Pace from No BS and the Hustle Season, Ben Baldwin from Space Bomb, Lucas Fritz from the Broadberry, Carlos Chafin. But I was curious about Session 5, the one right before it, talking about meeting the challenge tomorrow's companies with today's solutions. Obviously, nobody saw this coming. People were caught with their hands tied. They're trying to just keep it together. Some have been really proactive and creative in creating not necessarily new business models, but new procedures. The whole hub approach to live music, which I'm not a big fan of crowds, but I love live music. So there's always been this push and pull relationship with it. But I like the idea of the hubs where you go and you sort of have a space and you and a group of people go and watch from there. Maybe you take some chairs and stuff, but it's going to take a lot more than that. What was some of the feedback as far as people talking about evolving or pivoting? I mean, that word is used a lot these days, but it's absolutely necessary. Yeah. They've got to come up with new approaches. What was some of that may have been discussed?
I think there's still a sense of being a bit shell shocked. You still have, let's say, the lights of Broadway are shut down. Our live art scene here in Richmond is still at a bit of a standstill. I think with fall coming, I'm a little bit worried about the idea of, it's getting cold. And so parking lot concerts and drive-in theater concerts are going to be challenged. So it's what is a new model? And I genuinely believe, and I think, I genuinely believe it hasn't been thought of yet. And I think the right people just need to be brought to the table to kind of get around the problem. I've had several conversations around the willingness, but then you get to I'm trying to save my day, like trying to save the day. I'm trying to keep my people employed. The realities of the moment are still challenged. But I do believe that if we don't start looking further than, the 6 inches in front of us, we're going to have this problem in a persistent way. And I write about a muted recovery. Yeah, we'll have a recovery, but could we tap the full potential of a recovery that's sustainable and durable and long lasting? And that's my biggest concern right now.
Some of the things that local musicians were doing early is sort of symbolic to exactly what you're talking about. Symbolic of exactly what you're talking about, where when this hit and the lockdown was in place, all kinds of local and independent musicians hit the internet, hit Facebook Live and said, I'm doing a live thing, give what you can. Yep. And then it sort of ebbed. And it seems to me that sort of mirrored, think there are models and templates that sort of mirror each other in all these different scenarios. And what I'm talking about is the online performers sort of just kind of started backing away from it because I don't think they were getting much out of it. They were like,
Right.
"Hey, I'm playing live this Friday. Give what you can. Here's a virtual tip jar," and everybody shared it and said, "Support my friend. Please go to this," which is great. But nobody was really contributing. It's a lot like pay to play, where clubs will say, "You can play for $100. You can play on Friday, but you get so many tickets. If you don't sell them, it's coming out of your." And it's like the old joke of the musician gets to play for exposure, and he says, "Well, that's great. My rent is 250 exposures a month."
That's right.
What do you think we can do to really get some revenue going? People love live entertainment, but when it comes down to it, I mean, art is so subjective anyway. It's hard to get people, unless it's already validated by another group. This is a great painting. You don't want to pay for it. An artist needs to make a living. They scratch out a new painting. It's taken I don't mean scratch, but it's taken them weeks to do this painting. And they say, "This is worth $1,000." And somebody goes, "I wouldn't pay $1,000 for that."
But other people would.
What can we do going forward to place a value on live entertainment?
Well, what I will say is I think that's where the experts come in. I don't profess to be an expert in live entertainment as much as I don't profess to be an expert in travel and tourism and restaurants and trying to figure out how to get those businesses restarted in a meaningful way. However, what I am an expert in, and where our team at the Rocket Factory are focused, is bringing the right people to the table and creating the facilitated sessions, the design thinking, the delivered in a very accelerated way. Through exercises, and again, having the right people at the table and trying to reimagine businesses. And I think with the right people, the right expertise of encouraging the right conversations and literally pushing some people to get outside of what they believe they know about their current situation and think beyond, is what is required right now of all of us. And that's where we come in, is we want to help facilitate those conversations within sectors. I just had a conversation even in Philly with a friend of mine in Philly who's in the travel and hospitality sector up there. And, these convention associations that are going on, and even up there, and we're seeing it here in Virginia, but even in Philly also, and it's happening all over. They've been decimated, people-wise. They've been decimated. They don't have the resources, so now they're stuck a little bit they don't have the resources to go figure out what the next phase is because their teams have been furloughed or laid off. But how do you then come together and almost like do ecosystem building around these other, we talk a lot about ecosystem building around startups, but we don't talk about it in more mature businesses. And I think that's the opportunity. Then someone like me comes in and helps glue it all together and creates the structure for the thinking. That's what I believe needs to happen. I'll say this too, is that now more than ever, there are entire sectors that require a revisit of their mission. So there's a really well-known TED Talk provided by a guy by the name of Simon Sinek, and he talks about the golden circle, and it talks about your why at the middle and your how and the what on the outside rings coming out. I talk about mission because it's a rocket factory, and that's just on brand. But you've got to, if you can get back to your mission, like why did you establish your business in the first place, and live your mission, then the how you deliver and the what you deliver can change. And then of course you have to figure out how you're going to generate revenue or sustain whatever the value metric is in whatever you're trying to do. Again, that's the kind of answers we want to try to unearth in some thinking exercises and some workshops going forward, and backed up with research.
Some of that change, I would assume, is going to come in the form of partnerships, new partnerships.
Yes.
Where there was one venue, maybe now there's two.
Yes.
As quite literally the economy shrinks. We're not going to go back.
Well, where there's 2 venues and then it shrinks to 1 and they've joined forces.
What did I say? 1 to 2?
Yeah, but
Sorry.
that's okay.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Yeah, exactly. Joining forces.
Just keep me on track there,
right.
Jay.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, likewise. Because we're not just going to everybody go back. I mean, the education system and entertainment system, they're all indicative of that, where you basically have half capacity now.
Yes.
So half
the revenue and half and maybe below and not profitable.
Right, exactly. Which brings me to my next point. That wow, what a transition that was. The folks who seem to be handling this, and I don't mean prospering, but going, okay, what do we do now? Is the nonprofit sector. Their funding they're still hurting. They're hurting big time, and they're having to get rid of people. But they're kind of used to stuff happening, or not having money, or not having funding.
They're resourceful.
Yeah, they are very resourceful. And then the businesses that are managing to stay in existence, which is that's kind of where the bar is these days, are working with those nonprofits, whether they have board members or people who volunteer there. So it's interesting that, I don't know, we need an economist on here, because a lot of while the stock market has seemed like it is, pulling itself out of this hole, a lot of that is tech. And so the brick and mortars are the ones who are still suffering. And that is the sector of the economy that still seems to be shrinking.
It has been for some time. I mean, I'll just kind of real quick jump in on that one. I mean, again, I kind of see, having spent a bunch of time in retail, came to Richmond for Circuit City, watched Circuit City go through their pains, and ultimately walked out of the building with a bunch of other people in January of 2009, not to return. But I worked in the direct business. I worked for circuitcity.com, and direct to consumer really has been a thing for a very, very long time. Now we're seeing it accelerate even more out of necessity. And unfortunately, what's being left in the dust is, like you said, brick and mortar. I date myself a little bit here, but back in 96, so I started doing internet stuff in 95, 94. And that would be 1994 for you kids at home. And worked for some sports networks in Philadelphia doing that. And being there in that day, watching traditional media resist the go forward of the internet, and look where it's gotten us. It's gotten to, and I worked for AOL after the sports network in Philly, and we always knew like the Philadelphia Inquirer was going to have trouble long term. And now you see print newspapers or print media and traditional media sort of really starting. I mean, it's been happening for years now. I mean, even back to then, we saw it. And I think that's where we're at with travel and tourism, live arts. I think there's opportunity to say, it's almost like the conversation I had back then with our head of ad sales where I worked was, no one will ever buy ads on the internet. And I'm like, okay. And here we are. So we got to have that conversation. The hard one, the one that says, okay, what if no one wants to return? What if we can't work on consumer confidence enough to get them to return to a venue? Then what? We can't stay shut down like this. That doesn't sustain us. And I'm sad when I look at like, and I'm gonna get this wrong, but there's like the National Association of Independent Venue Owners, and I don't have the exact name of the organization right, but basically they're saying like 90% of them are at risk for going under. 90% nationally. Wow. I mean, that's the thing. We've got to figure out. You can see, get my engine started on this topic. But we got to figure out a new way forward, and we have to think in terms of what we've not thought of before.
It's a good point, and any conversation of this nature is difficult and uncomfortable to have.
Yeah. And
to your point about traditional media, I was in the same place. I come from traditional media, radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the early 2000s, internet was coming up, and radio goes, Don't worry about internet. Like you said,
Yeah.
nobody's going to want to pay for it. What we'll do is have HD radio. We'll have what we do, but it'll sound better.
Better.
And everybody's like, what? Because they didn't want to have the conversation. But then, that was a result of deregulation, and people were buying up 7 properties in one market. So that's a whole other issue. They deflated their own cost. What are there certain businesses more likely than others to have that conversation? Because a lot of them are like, I would love to have the conversation, but I can't right now. I just got to keep the lights on.
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think it's time that we have those conversations. I think there are definitely, I've started, out of SparkJam, I had conversations at more of like, for Virginia, I've had conversations at more of a more trying to think of a statewide type of effort. And I'm starting to realize, well, maybe there's a way to do some work around a specific time boxed, scope boxed kind of effort. And I'm having those conversations around, we'll call it around tourism. And you said about partnerships and all, I said ecosystem earlier. I do believe that it's time to almost like where maybe folks were competing with each other before, you got to figure out how to come together to save yourselves. And I think those partnerships do exist and can exist. And I think it just requires the right people at the table, I've said before, as well as the right facilitated discussion and glue. Because ultimately what also then has to happen is for people like me is once we figure out that strategy, it's in how do you communicate it out, and then how do you continue to communicate it out, and how do you continue to measure your impact of what you do and what you decide to do. And you've got to have the right metrics defined and all that to figure out, okay, here's a leading metric. Like if consumer confidence is a leading metric to getting people out of their houses and getting back to visiting venues, then, or whatever it happens to be, then what do the venues need to do to meet the consumer where they are? And measuring all of that through like a journey, customer journey. So not to get too consultant speak on you, but that's some of the things that need to get done. And it's a requirement of an ongoing communication strategy and plan, and then scenario planning, just like we would do in sports. It's like, runner on third and run on third and one out. You got the 4-hole hitters up. You got to get the ball to the outfield.
Right.
So it's an out, but the run scores. All good. That's a win. Things like that. If then, what happens if this happens? And we're not going to get it right. You can't get it perfect, but you're going to get it. You're going to cause the thinking and create the rigor around how to think, to then be able to adjust as you go. And I think to your point about nonprofits, I think startups are good at this. Mm-hmm. This understanding of being resourceful and getting things done in a new way and try to blow up, if you will, conventional thought and thinking. Certainly with the good rigor around solid business, profitability and strategy, needs to be facilitated and has to happen.
And our businesses, and I'm looking at again the sessions, and I'm looking. It comes through my filter from the live music.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what
But they're all related.
Know. They're absolutely all related.
All related.
And that brings me to my point: is that how many of these? And let me just run through a couple of the titles so people can kind of get their head around what we're talking about. So you had sessions on.
This is back to SparkJam, right, in June?
Yeah. SparkJam. Innovation, transforming business through challenging times, university showcase, pivoting for the future. Let's see here, tomorrow's companies, today's solutions. But where there's a lot of crossover, at least in the arena that we're talking about, and you can apply it to whatever sector you want, the advertising world, the post-production world, live music, digital marketing, all that stuff has a lot of crossover, and a lot of the people in those communities crossover with each other. Are the entities going forward, and I think they absolutely have to be, going to have to do many more things. And I look at it again in the music industry as bands and artists producing a record in their bedroom, which really hurt the studio and the recording industry, of which I was part. But they adapted, and everybody kind of figured out their place. There's no substitute still for going into a good studio with good microphones and good
Yes.
gear, but you can do the guts of it at home. Are
But
these
but does a consumer demand that level of recording any longer? And that's a rhetorical question. I don't have. I'm not saying I have an opinion about it. I'm just
right?
saying
Yeah,
what will the market bear?
yes, but less so. Yes, but less so. I mean, some people want you can still get Brooks saddles. We're both cyclists.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Still handmade leather
Yeah.
bike
Leather
seats
saddle. Yeah.
in a small shop in England. There's still a market for it, but it's not nearly what it used to be. It's
Right.
that kind of thing. And are these entities
Agree.
going to have to do many more things, be pretty good at a lot of them rather than great at just a few of them, because the landscape is the same size, but to your point, there's not as much demand for each of those individual services.
Yeah. And there's more of a demand at scale and price, and I'd say safety at this point, perceived safety of how to enjoy entertainment. If we're using that as the example,
Mm-hmm.
if we go back to our bike saddle discussion, it's like, you can buy a mass produced saddle by Bontrager or, one of the bike manufacturers, or you can buy a specialized handcrafted leather saddle, which requires a lot more maintenance, but people will swear by them. But it's going to be more of a different audience that you have to get after for that.
One more hypothetical, because they're always nice and safe. And then I want to get into exactly what it is you and the Rocket Factory do. We jump straight to the event, but I want to find out exactly what you do. But the one more tangent is, what's up with all the building that's still going on as the economy's shrinking and brick and mortar's going away? I don't, they say capitalism says if you're not growing, you're dying. All this building that's going on in Short Pump and other properties, every corner is being taken over by new building. Are we going to be able to support that, or is it just going to sit there and be empty? Like I said, that's a completely new tangent. I didn't mean to throw you that curveball, but do you have a view on any of that?
I mean, I do worry that, first of all, I worry about commercial real estate. Okay,
Right.
so we'll start there because, are people going back to work in an office? And I say that, yes, the answer is going to be yes. But to your point about what you said earlier about quality production, yes, but less so.
Yeah, right.
I mean, big companies are realizing that maybe we don't need to have all these people in one building, and they actually get more work done at home. The question is work-life balance, and there's the other side is the workforce piece. But I do worry about commercial real estate. Again, the brick and mortar is going out. Office buildings may become vacant. To your point, I think you're saying also about residential buildup. We've got it going on here on the south side of Richmond. There's a lot being built. And if you look back to 2008, there was a lot being built, particularly in my area. I think probably in your area too, because Richmond's got a lot of new construction in and around the metropolitan, and but a lot of it went on hold. There was an entire neighborhood that was being built here. It's like 5,000 homes. It's now there, but it started in 2008. They put the gate out in front, like this beautiful entrance, but then there was like only one neighborhood built for probably 6 years. And then they ramped it back up, and now it's taken off. The question is going to be, we're building all these apartment buildings and other construction. Who's occupying them? And the question is, if people are out of, so if companies are having trouble, those employees are not coming back to work, their income is suppressed, they can't move, like this is all the trickle down piece. It's like, and that's the thing, is like, we got to work on what is the foundation? Where do we start? And then building out to how it gets to consumers and people. And again, like, we got people that are workers, and we got people that are that are also consumers. Those same workers are consumers. And it is a bit of a supply and demand kind of piece, that if the workers don't feel good about coming back, then where are the consumers going to be there? Is the supply of people to serve consumers when they come back going to be there? So it's obviously very, very complicated, and not going to get solved in in a podcast between two buddies, but I will say there is just truly a lot of heavy lifting that has to get done still, and I don't think it's been thought of yet.
My point about the construction was more commercial based because I've been heard it
all in trouble, I think.
Yeah. Well, I heard it put that the modern office building is going to be our pyramids. You know, in a few hundred years, it'll be what was
what
that?
Is that?
What in the world? People drove somewhere to go to work.
People sat 2 feet from one another.
Right. How creepy is that? Pretending to work.
Yeah.
So talk about the Rocket Factory and how you guys are adjusting and what you can offer to especially entrepreneurs and small businesses and people trying to pivot their way out of this.
Yeah, so we've expanded. You know, when I launched, and we launched right at the doorstep of the pandemic, and then I think I shared with you in the last podcast that I was just starting the business. I'm still starting the business, and really like the way it's been going is obviously we're still getting rolling. I mean, the economy's been kind of like beating us back a little bit, but it was like, okay, what can we do? What can I do? What can I bring my network to do? And that's where SparkJam came about. But the Rocket Factory is a strategic, I won't even call it a marketing company. We were calling us a marketing company, but it's really, marketing, the word marketing's gotten a little bit thrown about. And I don't know that truly everybody understands what marketing is versus advertising or some other disciplines within marketing. But really when it comes down to it, it's finding, aligning customer with product or service, right? Offering, and then finding out where the value exchange is and then exploiting it. And my job should be to figure out how to get people to act, and or help those, help sectors or help companies figure out how to get their prospective customers to act, and then be profitable along the journey. And so we've pivoted to say, well, we got an offering for like super early startups, all the way through maturing startups, like large scale, full out strategy engagements. But then there's also this other piece that's coming about, and it's coming about by way of after SparkJam. I wrote this piece that's on the site called Crisis at a Crossroads. A lot of data, a lot of research around what I've been saying around the alignment of a workforce that's ready to work, consumers that are ready to consume, customers that are ready to consume, and the organizational mission, vision, and values, and trying to tie all that together, and then creating a plan to go forward. So we call that Reimagine, and that's all out there, sort of a transformational type of engagement, and it's not transformation. We throw the word pivot, we throw around the word pivot and transformation, but it truly is like, if you take it from what is the new consumer going to expect, or new customer, because if you're B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. New customer going to expect, and my mission, vision, values of an organization, and then the workforce that serves those customers. We want to solve for that. And if that means transformation, which it most likely does, which just means it's time to adjust for the time. It's the natural order of like how things evolve anyway. That's what we want to do. We want to uncover those opportunities, the challenges that kind of go to opportunities, and figure out how to go forward and go to market beyond solving, or beyond identifying the problem, is actually then solving for the problems. And you have to test and learn your way to scale.
And now you're picking up skills that you could never have imagined that you would have to have.
I didn't think I'd be working. So, obviously we're still interested in, and we are working with companies. And somebody asked me the other day when I was talking about the output of SparkJam and working at a sector level, they said, is that an area of focus or an area of opportunity? I said, it may be an area of focus. I mean, there's a definite need, and I'm hearing it. It's getting everybody to kind of like, so we talked about keeping the lights on. They got to get beyond the keeping the lights on part, but right. That's the part where I want to see some movement a little bit more. And I'm working on that. It's like, I think it can be solved by bringing almost like building an ecosystem around these challenges. and building partnerships. And I've always been good at that and always loved doing it. Love bringing people together. It's what we did with SparkJam. So we'll do, we want to do it for some development opportunities around, the economy and key sectors, and try to bring that, a new structure of how to think going forward.
Much like 2008 did, do you think going through what we're going through right now, specifically or especially companies like yours that help small businesses, are going to have features or offerings to small businesses, entrepreneurs, based on exactly what we're doing now? If a company-ending catastrophe happens to show its head, here's what we do. I mean, are there going to be, do you think there's going to be cottage industries based around exactly what's happening right now? I mean, more than just business, more than just business consultants, but, Armageddon situations.
I can't point to anything, but I mean, you got to imagine there are some that have already, cottage industries have popped up all around COVID.
That's true.
Little did I know how many, I guess actually I will declare one. Like when it all first started going down, a guy contacted me that had plexiglass, was in the plexiglass market. And then, he was doing, I forget what the application was he was doing before, but then he's like, I'm going to bring it to retail. I'm like, great. How many more people do you think are doing that right now? So you better hurry up, because literally if you're not out in weeks, you're going to be too late. And that's what happened. Like, look at how much plexiglass has gone up all around us.
How many people are selling masks on Etsy?
Masks and, all of that. And, that's just people responding to demand. I never thought I'd be watching TV and seeing commercials for masks.
Right.
Our one of our favorite retail sons and daughters at Ledbury men's clothes. They brought masks to the table or to market in their own on brand. So, everyone's adjusting. And will masks be part of their lineup long term? Who knows? But it's the same. It's, I think there are entire businesses that are coming up around this. There are entire businesses that will come and go because the demand will end and things will change, maybe. Or they will have learned the art of adjustment, and then we'll just adjust to the next thing. And, it's a little bit of what, I'm trying to do. I've always been flexible, and, I want to follow where the needs are. I'm big on needs. And so our mission is to help, right? So I know about my why. My why is to help people think and, get out of some situations or make money and be profitable. But at the heart of it is helping. So how do I help? And so now how do I help a sector or sectors that may be stuck in a certain way of thinking, and how can it help them get out of it? And it's just a matter of a lot of empathy that goes into all that, and bringing people to the table that want to help also. And we've got that. We're ready to hit that.
That much vaunted crossroads of passion and profit.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are Americans. I mean, we're pretty optimistic, and I don't mean that something happens, we go, no problem, we got this, but we tend to forge ahead somehow,
Yeah. It will work out. It's how, again, I go back to my earlier statement around sustainability, durability. We've been through pandemics before, and we didn't learn. We're still like, we're repeating some things we did back in the early 1900s. So, I don't know that, that's human nature. So we just want to ignore the bad stuff and kind of remember what was positive. But
yep.
I don't know. I hope we learned out of this. And I do get worried about sustainability of a recovery. That's the biggest thing I worry about.
We've already seen that this year with the
Yeah.
stock market come shooting back up, and now it's starting,
Yeah.
With another spike, it's going to start dipping again.
Yeah.
Well, what's next for you? Anything big on your on your plate coming up? I mean, as opposed I'm looking at SparkJam. Anything like that? Or
no new events planned at the moment. I am writing a book. There's an entrepreneur in town. His name is Art Espy. A lot of people know him. And he and I are going to write a book on marketing as it relates to, and it's part of his Misfit Challenge series. What he talks about, Art's got this, and it's funny because until we talked, I didn't understand why I felt a certain way. Entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders of companies, people they tend to feel like when I was working full time for other companies, I always felt a little bit like I was out of place. Mm-hmm. And now I understand why, because I probably deserve to be doing this on my own, and because I always want to try something different and be different about it. And it's just about discovery, by the way. It took me a good year and a half to figure it out, or figure out why I felt a certain way. And so we're writing about marketing, and I'm going to talk a lot about this whole value chain of building, and I say marketing again, back to business strategy, but it's like this full understanding of how to, create awareness around what it is you're selling, or a product you're offering, a service you're offering, how to get considered for that offering. So it's one thing people to know about you, another thing for people to really want to put you on the list and consider you. And then the next one is how do you convert that and create that into retention and loyalty, getting other people to refer you. That's a classic like marketing funnel stuff. Nobody shops that way. People don't buy in that straight funnel, straight line. I mean, they always shop at them. So it's understanding that whole value chain and the customer journey around that. But investing with intent, messaging with intent, developing the right metrics around each stage of the buyer journey. And that's good for small business, and it's good for large business. There's a lot of large businesses that have been in business for a lot of years and are making millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars. And yet they bring a new product to market, and then they forget what got them, what a good process looks like to get to market. So that's kind of how that's what we're going to be writing about. And it's coming out though in a year. So we've got a little time. But
that's interesting. And that last phase you talked about is where a lot of small business people end up failing. Not that they're not doing good work or doing the right thing, but the marketing and how the formula is so simple, it's complicated. But
it's very complicated. And it is so like I write about the 4 questions on my site. And I use that actually as I mentor companies and advise on companies. It's like, we got to work on 4 basic things. And they're basic questions that require a ton of work to understand. What's my product? Who's my audience? How do I put the 2 together? What's the competition? Like, are there others doing what I'm doing? Which most likely there are. And how am I going to adjust for that? You can still go to market. You just have to figure out how you're going to adjust. Is it based on price, message, packaging, how promotion, again, the P's of marketing. And then how are you going to make money, but not just growth for growth's sake, but like, how do you be profitable? Those are all, and so those are hard, the people I work with, the people I consult for, if they're doing it on their own, they spend weeks working through the problem, and that's through Launchpad or Launchpad offering. And then if we're doing it, it's going to take us weeks. And in certain engagements, we'll also go validate with, primary research to make sure we're right. I don't like guessing. So
when's the book? Do you have a target?
No, I don't have
time?
We're saying middle of next year.
Oh, okay. That's pretty
so
fast.
Middle of 2021. So it's not far off, but because the way time's going, but, we're literally just kind of like said, yep, let's do it. And now we got to get writing. So
yeah. In COVID time, that's yesterday.
I know. Yeah.
There are other days of the week. There's just, Thursday day and, yester week.
Yes.
Anyway.
My Saturdays feel like Mondays.
They all feel the same. TheRocketFactory.net is your website. And again, what brought us together is SparkJam, and I see a lot of stuff through that filter. So it's really cool getting your perspective on everything else and following up on the event. And, maybe we'll do something like that. I think I mentioned the first time we talked, Route 1 South was something that happened here with a group of musicians and club owners put that together. This was like a tiny little version of that, but with more panels. And it's a really cool idea. And the fact that the conversation, you get the conversation moving and get it from all different facets of the business community, the creative community, academic community. It's a really cool thing, Todd. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for being here.
I keep getting asked, like, well, when are you doing 2020, SparkJam 2021? And I'm like, well, I got to first see where we come out of SparkJam 2020. But it is an interesting thought, and, I've been thinking a little bit more about it, but, I want to see what I want to get started on it much earlier than 5 weeks to put it on. So.
Yeah, you like a task, don't you?
Yeah, but the little more time.
Todd Feldman, therocketfactory.net for all the stuff we talked about. Thanks for your input here, man. Let's do it again.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Cool. Thanks to Todd for coming by. If you have any questions for him, therocketfactory.net online. If you have any questions for me, goodeyepodcast@gmail.com, or you can hit me directly at j@jsmack.com. Either way, I do appreciate your time and attention and your open mind, as always. And until next time, try to look at life with your good eye.